Everyone should receive a message saying that you agree to the recording. So let's start. So very excited to have you guys here today. My name is Julie Vaillancourt. I'm one of the literacy specialists with Rockyview. And with me, well, I'll let you ladies introduce yourself. We have Kelsey.
Oh, you want me to go next? I thought we were going in the list of the names. I'm Kesley Bagnall. I used to be a learning specialist in the area of learning support. And so I have a little bit of a different lens than some people do when it comes to story workshop. But currently I am teaching grade 1 at Northcott Prairie.
Hey, and I'm Carleen Pocklington. I'm at Fireside School. I'm very new to Story Workshop, but I love what I see online. I love literacy, and it's a journey, a work in progress, and I'm just here to share. And I'm in grade 1, like Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Alison Humphrys. I teach kindergarten at Fireside School, and I've been incorporating Story Workshop into my practice for about 5 years now.
I'll round out the group. My name's Susan Noble. I'm a literacy specialist on the team with Julie. And I am super grateful to our presenters today. I had very, very, very little to do with all of this. I feel like an imposter with my name being on the PowerPoints, but I'm super glad to be here and to learn with our partners today.
So before we start, we are going to take a little poll. So you should see a poll on your screen. Is everyone seeing it now? So you have 2 questions. The first question is just a temperature check. What song best represented what you feel today? I see it. That's good. That's a reaction I want. So it's anonymous. No one will know. Okay. That's good. I see a few Bob Marley people. Okay, that's good. So I see a lot of people are just trying to keep it chill with the 3 Little Birds from Bob Marley. And I see a few people living on a prayer. This was Susan and I song last week on a few low moments, like, Susan, we got this. And we sang this a bit in the office. And the second question is just for us to take a temperature check. How familiar are you with the storytelling workshop? Storytelling what? Tell me more. So we see one person who's somewhat new. I've heard about it, but I've never done it. I have dabbled my toes in it. I've used it. And the last one, Susan and I were kind of laughing. I could teach a session with my eyes closed. Why was I not contacted to lead it? So, and one of the reasons why we added this is that today's session is meant as a sharing. So we have teachers who've played with it, Carleen, Alison, and Kelsey, who have lived it, done it in their class. But this is meant also as a discussion. It's a sharing session. So feel free at any time to take the mic or write questions in the chat box, and we will answer those. So we can move to the next slide, Kelsey. One thing that I wanted to share when we're talking about storytelling workshop, I'll just share something from my own personal experience. In my role, I've worked a lot with writers workshop in the younger grades. We've done that in grade 1 and up. And what I loved about using writers workshop was that there was 2 things. There was choice. Students were given choice in what they were writing about. And also there was another part that I love was that celebration. At the end, students got to share what they were doing. And the more I've read and learned about storytelling, what I love is that it also combines those elements. And that's when I said that storytelling transferring into the writing. And I know Kelsey, who's very generously share example of her students writing on Twitter or on Instagram. Like, you can see the engagement of the students in the writing piece. And I think it's part of that storytelling. And students are, again, given that choice and they can celebrate their ideas. Another thing that I love in Writers Workshop is that before kids get to write, we're giving them the opportunity to turn and talk to a partner, to talk out loud, think out loud, write up in the air the story that they want to write. They are also given the opportunity to sketch their ideas before writing it. All of that prep work is what's going to help our students transferring that into the writing. And that's where, again, that's what I love, that connection with storytelling, because I think it has all of those elements. So just before we start, I'll just open up the question to the mics before our ladies start sharing their example. But what does storytelling looks like in your class? Does anyone would like to share what it may look like in your classrooms? Just wait a few seconds. Okay, maybe too early for the sharing. Let's move on maybe to the next slide. Kelsey.
All right, so that's me. Story workshop comes from Opal School down in Portland, Oregon, and I've had the privilege of visiting twice. And it's based on, it was an inquiry into how does art and writing connect. And so the book that you shared, I Am Story, is our very first story that I start Story Workshop with, and we ask, where do stories come from? And so there's a process to doing story workshops. So we always start our process with a story, and we discuss the story, and it depends on what the focus of that story workshop. At the very beginning, it's just learning how to use the materials to create a story and what is a story. So we're still just at that stage where what is happening in your story, rather than I built a house, this is my tree, this is a person. And we move on to who are the characters, where does the story take place, and just adding more and more detail as we go along. And in order to do that, we use loose parts and all various sorts of materials in the classroom to play. And through play, they can work independently, they can work with a partner, or there's groups of 3 and 4. And it's really exciting to see in one session, they're all collaboratively working together, but there can be 3 different stories happening at one time. So it's very exciting to see that. Kelsey, the next slide. The next process is what I call recording. So for beginning kindergarten, it's drawing what story you created. And at the beginning, it's very hard to, it's quite the concept for them to record the story that they created. So we focus on the picture matching your story. And then the second time we start to scribe their stories once their picture is drawn. And then from there, as we learn our letter sounds, I focus on what is an important word in your story, and we sound that out together. So adding that writing piece. And that recording piece really is allowing them to become authors. And we talk about how do we make it more detailed, and what does a storybook look like, adding color and detail, and just what becoming an author means. And then after they're done, because I have 23 students and 18 in the afternoon, before I share, they have to go and find partners. Of course, kindergarten works a little differently this year than grade 1 to above. We're allowed to collaborate. They have to share with a partner, And that partner will give them feedback on adding more detail or asking them questions like what happens in their story. From there, I do Story Congress, and I share some of their stories, and because I read what was written on their story, and I share with them why I chose it, that it was, you know, like they added lots of detail, or there was, they really focused on what was happening in their story. So that is Story Workshop in my kindergarten.
Just on writing,
Okay.
if you want.
Sorry, we're going to ask you to mute your mic. Thank you. Is there any questions for Alison?
Yes.
Now, okay, Alison, you went, like you can tell that you're just mastering it, right? Like it's just flowing. Is there any tips and tricks that you could give to someone who wants to start this?
I think care of the materials is very important. So I wait a while. I'm very focused on these materials have to last and they need to be respected. So of course, in kindergarten, we have free exploration. So they are using the materials. So we focus on using. And then when I do story workshop, I narrow those materials down because cleanup is a little bit different. Sometimes the loose parts become a lot, but I've learned a lot. I saw a session on less is more at the end in June, but those of you that have been in my classroom, it looks extremely different. There is very few materials now due to cleaning and stuff, and you know they are able to storytell with that as well.
Mm-hmm. There's one question for you, Alison. Are there any particular books that are your favorite for beginning your initial story workshops?
I am a story. You know, I think it just depends on, I'm a Story is a great one. Stuck is a great one to add when you want to introduce a problem and then the solution. Oh geez, now I should have created a list.
And don't worry, we're putting you on the spot, but after the session, I'll send you can email me some names and then I can send that to the participant.
Yeah.
We've got another question. How long do you spend building one story? Building on story.
So the whole process, and for me in kindergarten, takes an hour, from more than an hour from reading. So instead of, I just say we play in a different way. So instead of doing our free exploration, we focus on story workshop, and it is most of the day. It is doing the story, playing and recording. So it's a good hour, more than an hour.
Okay. Thank you, Alison. Is there anything else, guys? Any questions? No. Kelsey, I think that's you.
Yeah. So I am also, like Carleen, fairly new to implementing Story Workshop. I had the honor of going to Opal School in Oregon a couple of years ago. So that's where I saw it in person and saw it take place. And then I, as a learning specialist last year, I also had the opportunity to see Story Workshop in different classrooms around the division. So I had a background that way. But then I decided to take the Story Workshop course that is an online course from Opal and really dive in deep into the structure of Story Workshop and how I could implement it in my grade 1 classroom. So as Julie talked about earlier, about Writers Workshop, Story Workshop is based off of the research from Writers Workshop. So you will see lots of different things that you see in Writers Workshop as part of the Story Workshop structure. So in my classroom, this picture is how we do story workshop. We create, we write, and we draw. And kids are allowed to enter that cycle wherever they want. At the beginning of the year, we saw a lot of kids entering specifically only at play. But now that we're 46 days into school, some of our kids just go straight to writing because they want to continue on from where they left off yesterday. So what I really like from a learning support background is how inclusive the structure is, in that every kid in my classroom is somewhere in this structure, and they're all working in grade level curriculum in some way, whether that's working on storytelling orally or working and experimenting with the print. For me, I started the year this year with the book Ralph Tells a Story. And it's about a little boy that doesn't know how to write, and he doesn't feel like he has a story to tell. And so he avoids writing at all costs and hides under his desk. And then he realizes that he has an imagination and tells his story. So that's how I started the year. The other thing in our classroom community is we've really built our community around it's okay to make mistakes. And the first month of school, I purposely made a million mistakes so that the kids saw that I make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, it's no big deal, we're just going to move on from that. And my kids have nicknamed me the mistakeful teacher because of that. But knowing that it's okay to make mistakes made it an easy jump for lots of my kids to become risk takers. And I feel like being a risk taker in story workshop in grade 1 is a really important thing, because when you start to incorporate things that you're learning from sight words to letter sounds and digraphs and all that pieces into your writing, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And so it is a big risk to take to make that jump. And so at the beginning of the year, my kids really started with playing mostly. Now, because of COVID, how I introduced materials was different than I had originally wanted to. Originally, I would have had the kids working collaboratively together and had them set out around the room. But because of COVID and where we were in September, the kids still had that choice on what materials they would use, but they collected materials and they kept them in a container for about a week to 2 weeks, and then they would rotate them out, and every student had their individual Play-Doh. Recently, I've changed that so that play is more collaborative, just going through scenario 1, the document, and then talking to admin about what it looks like to collaborate during COVID in grade 1. I've adjusted that, and so my kids are working more collaboratively with materials, with the exception of Play-Doh. Everybody has to have their own Play-Doh. They just do a lot more cleaning and wear a lot more masks now, but they don't care because they really want to collaborate. So they'll do those things. So in September, many of my kids, my rule always was you have to get something down on paper. From the very beginning, Opal talks about setting the expectation that you create and you write. It's not you're just playing. You have to set that expectation and be very clear about it. And so in September, I was very clear about setting that expectation. Many of our students wrote their stories by picture drawing. And then I encouraged students and nudge students along to take those risks and add those labels. And then just like Alison said, she does story congress. I also do story congress at the end and do an author's chair. And I have 5 students share at the end of every student story workshop, and I project their work up onto the whiteboard. And so seeing kids starting to write more and more was really a nudge for lots of our kids to start taking that on themselves. So the kids were able to make that jump. Even though lots of my students are engaged in writing, the actual physical print part of that now, I'm still encouraging my kids to draw pictures because it adds detail and it also helps them write their stories more. So the writing piece started out as that labeling. I don't read a story at the beginning of every story workshop. I think your provocations can look different from time to time. I do read stories, and Opal really stresses the use of high quality children's literature to help support that. I've also used some mini lessons to help with their writing. So parts of a sentence, Jack Hartman has a really great catchy video, and my kids love Jack Hartman. So I've used that before as a provocation, and same with parts of a story. Jack Hartman also has that. And so I've used those as provocations. And then once kids are started playing, I always remind them about halfway through that they need to remember to get something down on their page. Students, as they take risks, they were introduced to different types of tools. So the word wall in the classroom, we as a school for kindergarten grade 1, or all my grade 1s were exposed to Jollyphonics last year. So each student has a Jollyphonics sound card. And so as they sound it out, they use that to help their writing. They read the room. So not just the word wall, but we have lots of print up around. Opal also has a chart called I'm Not Afraid of My Words, and it's about kids taking a risk and writing their spelling down and trying to sound it out. And then I'll write down the words, and then power words are our sight words. And so I just have a couple of kids that at the beginning of the year, most of my kids were writing just with drawing or maybe one labeling. So this is just a showing of a child that just drew a picture, and now he's writing multiple sentences. And my story workshop block is an hour long as well. And I have kids that will write the same story for multiple days in a row. And they just keep going back and adding more detail and adding on what happens next. They know that if they ever get stuck, they go back to their materials and see what happens next. I have kids that write a new story every day as well, but yeah, so there's this. And then this is another example at the beginning of the year. This child was copying the word mommy off of the word wall, and now she's writing multiple sentences with a story, and we're 46 days into school. And this is something that I see on kind of a regular basis now, is because they're not scared to take those risks. And the other thing that I think is really important about the structure with Story Workshop is I never write in their books unless I'm scribing. I never correct their writing. It's not about that. If I marked up their book and wrote that they had spelled words wrong or different things like that, they wouldn't continue to take those risks. So I think it's really important to stress that this is theirs, it's not mine. And when they reflect back on this book, because they're going to get them sent home, and when they're 20, they would rather see their progression happen than seeing what the teacher wrote all over their work. So it's something that is really important to me.
I love what you said. I'm just going to add something about that risk taking. This is something that I love also from Writers Workshop. And just an example that I can share as me as a teacher. I remember, now I'm a bit older, on the older side, so I've been teaching for many years, and I still remember at the beginning of my career having my students lining up at my desk for me to correct their spelling, or like they would come at my desk, how do I say this in French, right? Like, and I had this huge lineup, and after a while I was like, oh, I have a better idea. You stay at your desk and I'll walk around, or bring me that whiteboard and I'll write the word for you. But what I realized, what I was really telling my students, like, oh my goodness, don't take any risk. Before take a risk, raise your hand and I'll come and give you the words, right? And that's the message that we're sending to our students when they come and ask you, Miss, how do I write? How do I spell? Instead of giving them tips to let it flow, take risk, by us giving them the words right away, we're sending the message of not taking risks. So I really appreciate what you're saying, Kelsey, on that risk taking. There's a few questions, Kelsey, before you talk about the next slide. Do you do story workshop every day in kindergarten?
I'm not in
Kelsey, I guess.
kindergarten. I'm in grade
Okay,
1, so
sorry.
I have
Yeah,
that.
I
Allison?
see. Yes, she answered. She was.
I alternate my story workshop with my outdoor school. So because kindergarten is so short on time, I do 1 week story workshop and 1 week outdoor school. So it's every 2 weeks. I wish it was more, but it's, yeah.
Mhm.
Kelsey, how often are you doing it in grade 1?
I do it 4 days a week. And I do it in the afternoon purposely, because the afternoon in grade 1 drags a little bit. And so last year, myself and my teaching partners worked with Jordan Neufeld from Winsong, and talked about how she implemented it. And she suggested after lunch in the afternoon, just because the day can be really long in grade 1. And it's been amazing. Like, the kids are amazing that way. And we do it 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. And then Fridays for me, which is separate from story workshop, is based on inquiry. And so we dive deep into project work on Friday. So that's why we don't do it on Friday, but it's an hour every day, Monday through Thursday. And then Rachel, I see you have a question about FI. So if you take a look at the inquiry teacher on Instagram, she talks about Story Studio, and she has a lot of kids telling stories at that point using French, because they don't have a ton of vocabulary yet. So it's a lot of oral pieces, I think, in FI versus trying to get a whole lot down on paper.
And I think to add to this, I was just, Kelsey, you're faster than me. I was just typing my reply. I think what I would do with FI, but this would apply to ELL learner. It would apply to any, like I find in FI at any spellers. Try to use the word walls. If you've got a word wall, refer to them to any environmental print that you have in the classroom. But then celebrate if in the text, or even if already in the story, they are able to use 3 words in French. That's awesome, buddy. You knew 3 words, but then keep track of the next time whether they're sharing orally or on paper. Even if there's loads of English words, that's fine, because the next time you're looking for progress, right? Like if they had 5 words, oh my God, kind of like the example that Kelsey is showing, right? Eventually it will look like this, but just celebrate any progress that they may have.
This student here is an ELL learner. He is level 1, came in speaking next to no English. So the first, this picture is from today. This is the first time that he's attempted to write a sentence, was today, after being in the class for 2 months. And so for the first little bit, he just drew pictures because that's what he saw his peers doing. And then same thing, he started using the word wall and that environmental print. And then today he took the next risk. It just, everybody's in it in their own place, and that's okay.
Okay, so I'm very new to Story Workshop, but having the opportunity to go into Alison's classroom last year and just see how engaged the kindergartens were really inspired me to take a look at my program, to take a look at how I can increase that engagement. I had the opportunity also last year to go to the design cohort. So Adam, I see you're here. Adam inspired me as well to kind of take a look at my environment, my classroom, to incorporate more play. So like I said, I'm new to this. I'm in the course that Kelsey has taken from Opal. So I've just started the first couple modules. I'm working my way through it. I've told my students, I've never taught story workshop like this. I would like you guys to actually take the lead and teach me. So we're all learning together. We're all taking risks, and I'm taking the lead of the students because they've had those experiences in kindergarten and they're able to share what they feel story workshop should look like. So of course, September was really just building the language, the communication skills for us. And so I just focused on storytelling through pictures, like Kelsey said, through the play. And I set the expectations as well, like Kelsey, that we do the create, but we do need to actually record something onto our paper. So I've posted a lot of videos and all sorts of tweets if you're on Twitter. I'm not going to play it right now, but if you do go back to the PowerPoint and click here, there is a video of my student and he's telling his story. And it may just look like a picture, but it really is true, right? A picture is a million words. And he's told this whole fantastic story about police, bad guys, scanners. And then I talked to Alison and I said, where do I go with this? Like, what do I do next? What am I doing? And Alison told me, just go around, ask them questions. What's the setting in your story? They might not know what setting means, but that's that conversation. That's that teaching at the beginning. And of course, now they all know what setting is. They're including that. Do you have a problem? Or, wow, that's such a great problem. So just incorporating that language into your everyday conversation with the students. Okay, Kelsey, I think you can move to the next one. Then I realized that they all wrote their important word in kindergarten. And so after we had learned our Jolly Phonics, October looked a little bit different. We started to move from pictures to actually writing an important word that went with our picture. And did it make sense with our picture? So here on October 7th, you can see that one of my students, he drew this elaborate picture and his word was squid. And that was all independent and he was able to write down using his Jolly Phonics sounds. And then the picture to the right, one of my students has wrote a story about going to the park and they've sounded out the words there, or the word there. And that is what our writing looked like in October. As far as sharing our work goes, like Kelsey, we've, with COVID, had trouble with the collaboration piece, but we've just started to really wear a mask, do more cleaning, and we're now sitting and sharing with a partner. So it's really nice to celebrate that work because Writers Workshop, that's one of the things that is so important, that celebration. So just seeing that word and the celebration that we've had has been fantastic. Okay, next slide. So I have taught Writers Workshop the past couple of years. So I've kind of taken the lessons from Writers Workshop and in speaking to a few other people on Twitter, like Jody, who's here as well, taking those lessons from Writers Workshop and incorporating them into Story Workshop. So for the month of November, we've just started going through and talking about, now we're going to focus on personal narratives. So what is your story? What can you tell me that's happened? And so I'm using Lucy Calkin's lessons But having that level of engagement through the play and the story workshop has just been more engaging, and there's been more choice in it, I've found. So this little guy, he's built himself, and there's a TV there, and he wrote, "I like movies." You'll also notice, if you go back, Kelsey, one slide, you'll notice that we started off the year with just a blank journal. And then if you go forward to the next slide, Kelsey, I've moved them now that we're in November, we're starting to write with the lines. And that was a big thing, a huge celebration that we've moved on to the next journey in our writing. So that's pretty exciting for us. And next slide. And my computer just froze. Sorry, my computer froze. So now we're doing sentence writing, and I know that Kelsey, you've already touched on Jack Hartman, but like you, I've been using some of those provocations. I've used stories, and Alison, I will be using stuck to introduce problems. But yeah, so I'm still new at writer or story workshop. And then now also with us having partners, a lot of the students are using a writing checklist and going through and helping each other with sentence writing. Do I have my finger spaces? Do I have punctuation? Using the word wall. All of those things do tie back into story workshop, but the level of engagement is through the roof. They just love it. And when I had three-way conferences, the number one thing that parents said was, my child loves story workshop. My child wants to come to school because they want to do story workshop. And that's exactly what we all want. We all want to hear how excited they are, especially to write. So, yeah. And then I know that the question in the chat box, Kelsey, does it 4 times a week? I am just doing it 3 times a week. I'm still new to it. I also still like to incorporate some guided writing at this time of the year and focusing on sentence structure in a little bit more of a structured environment. So I'm doing a bit of both. Okay, Kelsey, I think that is my last slide. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I love, Carleen, your comments about the engagement. It's funny because having been in a FI class, I still remember grade 1 French immersion, and it was recess, and I was just there observing, and the bell rang for recess, and all the kids look at the teacher, "No, Madame Sally, no, Madame Sally, we want to stay in." And I was like, oh my goodness, right? And they were writing for 30 minutes. But I think it goes back to that engagement because students have a choice. Writing is fun. It's not just write in your journal what you did on the weekend, right? Like they can take it wherever they want. And I think that's the key. And that differentiation is happening in a natural way, right? Like I said, as you're going to confer, you can tweak through that conferring or through that little chat, you will push the students all at their own pace, right? I also love what you said, Carleen.
The inclusion, what Kelsey said, the inclusion, right? And especially in grade 1 with so many different levels and coming in at so many different places, it's just so inclusive. Everyone can do it.
Yeah. I also love another part that you shared about that, like when we got, and just for people who are new to it, like when we're talking about celebrations and sharing, we're not talking about setting up, well, it could be like a big gala in your class and inviting guest speaker, but that celebration could be as small as turn and talk and share that story to someone in your class. It doesn't have to be big, but as long as it's not just them and the teacher, because often as a teacher, the feedback, I know me thinking back on my first year of teaching, my feedback was my red pen circling all the grammar mistake, right? Like, so that celebration is meant more as, let me hear your ideas. Like, what do you have? Like, let me hear your message. And as a way, and I'm thinking on Rachel's comments for FI, but also Kelsey about your ELL learner. what I love about what you said, Carleen, having that buddy system, having students partnering up with a student allows students to create that safe place. And I can share myself as a ELL, obviously I'm French in case you didn't know. If I'm being asked to share my story, or even me now, this is many years building my confidence to speak in my second language in front of you, but that took many, many years of practice. So when we're asking our little new students who are barely speaking that language, asking them to share that in front of a whole big group, it takes a lot of courage. So having students being with a partner, it allows them to share their message because they also have ideas, but it creates that safe place where they feel safe in doing that.
Even in kindergarten, because they can share with more than one more person, the collaboration that goes on in the language development is absolutely astronomical. They're learning so much and they don't even know it. And it's just, they're inserting words and they're just and it's amazing. It's really exciting to see. And those ELL learners definitely benefit from that situation. Mm-hmm. And it definitely is a very safe spot.
And I'll add one more thing. On Fridays, we always do catch-up time in our classroom. And when the students are done their catch-up time, they have their free choice time. Majority of the students during their free choice time are choosing to do story workshop. That's just how powerful it really is.
That's agreed. Awesome. My kids are the same, Carleen, and I know my teaching partners here have had the exact same thing. Kids want to write. They love it.
That's awesome. I see a question for you ladies in the chat box. So do you give them material based on the book you read to provoke provocation? I do a discovery time, playtime, and I have a journal for them to document their learning.
So I'll jump in for a second on materials. I know that there's some moms in here, but baby pouch lids, little things like that, corks. If you start just collecting those things, there's lots of things that you can use for story workshop. So it doesn't have to be fancy. As far as books go, I personally don't. It's amazing the creativity that the students will come up with. A cork can be a person. Those little baby pouch lids turn into hats. They turn into scanners, cameras, you name it. So no, I just give them a bunch of materials. Everybody has their individual bin, and every day they're just creating whatever they want it to be. So I'm not purposely taking certain materials to go with specific books. Anything, their imagination goes wild.
What's in the box that you have? What kind of stuff do you have?
I have corks. I did order peg people off Amazon. I have little gems, dollar store materials. Dollar store is your best friend. The baby pouch lids, you know, the applesauce lids, the green ones, different colors. I've got rocks in mine. What else is in there? We've got Lego. We've got the little foam stickers, foam shapes. Sorry, I'm looking. You know the little red Solo cups that you can get at the dollar store? Those are fantastic too. But a lot of recycled goods. You can start tomorrow, anything.
Sorry, can I just jump on and ask a question? That was my question, and I just feel like I need to talk it out instead of type it out. But I just wonder, I have a bunch of loose parts. I do Regio in my classroom a lot. So my question is, do you have a bucket of loose parts for each kid and then they go and do their story time?
That's how I started this year. So I had loose parts and the kids could choose I had loose parts all around the classroom, and they would go and collect their loose parts in their little container, which isn't huge, just this big. And then they would keep those loose parts for their story. And that way they had choice over what parts they got, but they were loose parts. I have also, I do use peg dolls that are painted, partly because it's a stress relief for me to paint and create peg dolls. So I have a ton of peg dolls that are painted in the classroom, and my kids use those to help all the time with
Your
their.
peg dolls?
Pardon?
Can we see your peg dolls?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
I'm just gonna jump on and share some that Alison made me.
Okay, I know what they are now.
I personally don't paint them. I just don't have the time. I'm a busy mom outside of school. So these are just the unpainted version.
That's the same as mine. I have a lot of unpainted ones that have or are fairly simple, just like that. But I do find it as a stress relief to paint. So like I have Ninja Turtles, which all the superheroes, all of the princesses that I have created are out currently. I don't have any left.
Kerstin, mind stopping sharing your screen, because I think part of the official presentation is done just so we can see actually better yours, so we can have the full screen to see the stuff you're sharing.
Thank you. I couldn't see any of what you shared, Kelsey, because I couldn't find you.
There's the little guys. I recently made gingerbread because that's what my kids have asked for. So gingerbread peg dolls. So, yeah.
And you guys said those are from Dollarama?
Amazon. The cheapest place I've been able to find peg dolls is from Lee Valley. And they only have the one size, so this size, but the more you order, the cheaper they get. And so I tend to order them in batches of 100, which sounds ridiculous, but I've gone through over 200 in the last 6 months. And partly because my kids like to decorate them because they see me doing it. But when you order them in batches of 100, you get 100 for $33, which is substantially less than Amazon.
There was a question in the chat box about how often students change materials. I personally have just given them a box of materials for the year. With COVID, it was a very sad day. All of mine were organized together. And what I did this year so that everyone could have a little bit of everything is I mixed them all up this year. So everybody has a little bit of everything, and I won't be changing it this year just because of COVID.
Whereas I have been changing my materials, the kids change them out on Thursdays because it's the 72-hour rule. So Thursdays, we drop everything in a bucket. I use the spray cleaner and I spray in there anyways, and then it stays in that bucket until Monday. So it's that 72-hour rule. This week and this week only, I've created more collaboration in the create part of it. And I spoke with Bin, went through the document, and we are doing a lot of hand washing and wearing masks, and the kids are cleaning materials in between touching them. And so, but that's because my kids wanted more. They wanted to collaborate and work with their peers. And so the only way that I could do it is by saying you have to wear a mask, you have to do these things, and they're doing it because they want to. It's more work for them. They have to clean more, and they don't love wearing masks, but every single kid during story workshop will put those things on because it's that important to them to be able to collaborate with their peers.
Mm-hmm. I have a quick question. I'm just wondering, with everyone that's here, is anyone an online teacher? Yeah, I know. I knew you were. I was just thinking, you know, with Story Workshop, it can be done with your online classes too, right? And I think that would definitely increase your classes engagement online. So it definitely can be done in a classroom setting, but definitely can be done online. And actually might even be more powerful online because they have their own materials at home, their stuffies. If it were not COVID, I would actually ask the students to bring in some of their own materials too. So I just think it's so powerful and can be used for online students.
I agree, Carleen. I think that's why I'm here, because as a lead, like we're just trying to see what works for Story Workshop, and is like in combination with Writers Workshop or different than Writers Workshop. I agree they have all those materials at home. And then how do you get to those core routines of like reflection and having feedback and building the structure that Kelsey talked about, right? And like Alison articulated so well. Like, so what does that look like for online teachers to build that into their routines of building competent writers, right? Or confident writers, sorry. Lisa's here, so. Lisa Monteith, yeah.
Hi, I just had a question about for online. If I only have such a short time with the kids face to face, it's hard to guide the students to do Story Workshop. It would kind of have to be parents to do those things, because in the short time that I have with them, I have to teach the other stuff, right? Like the teaching part. So it would be a way of training parents on how to support their child's play and storytelling stuff. And I'm not exactly sure how to go about that. I mean, totally interested in doing it. I'm not sure how to go about it.
So I can say that one of the advantages, I guess, of having my kids in the classroom is I've taught my kids the structure and they know it really well. But I've had weeks where I've had over 50% of my class gone because of illness. And so I went, and I know, Lisa, you know this because you've watched the video, but I went on and did an Instagram TV video for my parents explaining the different steps, and my kids know it. But then they write at home when they're sick, and parents send me pictures, or they'll come back after they're not sick anymore and they have a story and they want to share it with the class. So I don't know if you could spend one of your times with your kids really setting up that structure. And I know it takes away from other things, but if you were to spend the time up front, maybe you could do it more often, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was really excited to get started, and I started to get kids to gather materials so that they could do it. And then I backed up a bit because I realized there's a couple more skills that I want to get going before I jump into this, so that I can't be there with them when they're doing it. So it's hard to support those, oh, we capitalize our I, or, oh, hey, if you want to sound this out, this is where you look. Like it's hard to get those things into place, but I'm definitely going to. I just haven't quite started. Christmas, like December might be the time that we do it.
And really, even if your kids just start by drawing their story, that's like the easiest place to start for them. And then from there, you can, start to encourage that, or do a story workshop modeling of yourself doing it and playing with the materials, but start with just having them draw.
Just baby steps, Lisa, because you can do it.
Totally. I'm gonna do it. I just haven't totally done it yet. I just want to learn a little bit more before I jump both feet in. And I'm gonna jump both feet in. I just not quite there.
But I think too, Lisa, with setting your expectations and doing some of that pre-teaching, I think starting later, maybe after Christmas even, you'll have a lot of that set up, that it's just going to run a lot smoother, right? Having some of that sentence structure, all of those little lessons leading up will just help you with Story Workshop.
Lisa, I had tried Story Workshop in the spring when we went to online learning, and I had the same kind of struggles that you're worried about with parents. I found the parents had a hard time getting past the fact that their kid was spelling words wrong or not writing a complete sentence. And so we tried having the kids tell their story, like putting the focus more on the oral storytelling, and they took videos of themselves telling the story of their creation. And then they went back to the videos afterwards and they would actually listen to themselves tell it, pause the video, and then try to write the sentence of what they just said. And I found that that kind of was a nice medium for the parents to feel like they were focusing on writing a good sentence, but the kids to still be able to share all of their ideas. So we did that for a little while.
That's a good idea.
To work.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a good idea.
Can I just add to that, Jody? Like when we went to Opal, I think some of the most powerful part, like in people who have gone to Opal, is like how the teachers are sort of interacting and giving that feedback. Because that's such, if you go there, it's just a magical place of like how teachers are interacting and like talking about the writing and process and stuff. And like Kelsey's shaking her head. It is, and so like it's almost like coaching parents to do that, Lisa. If you get to that point, I don't know, Jody, how you uncovered that with emergency learning last year, or like would that be a possibility? Because I like your idea of recording it first and then what does it look like, or maybe that's like your small group conferencing. My brain goes to that. So, and that could be face-to-face as well, right?
Yeah, I think the coaching of the parents is a big piece for me. In the spring, I decided it was such a short-term thing that it wasn't really worth it, but for a longer term, if you can get the parents on board and really understanding the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because the way our parents might focus just exactly to what you said on the grammar, on the spelling, on the correct spelling, right? And they look at it from a different perspective. It's almost
Julie, before you cut everybody off and shut it down, I just want to say, like, I assess story workshop for writing, and I assess it for lots of different things. But one of the ways I showed my parents how developmental writing happens and why I'm not correcting and why I'm not marking up their books is using the developmental stages of writing. And I've shared this with all of my parents so that they understand how writing happens and where we start and how they're making gains. And so for me, when I assess story workshop in September, I'm going to assess it once a month. I reflect back on the developmental stage of writing and I tell my parents where their kids are at specifically so that they can reference and be like, oh, okay, I get why she's not doing this and that type of thing.
Kelsey, people are asking more information about where you get those.
It's a PDF. This is just my plan book, but I have it printed off so that when I do assessment, I have it beside it. And so I can send it out. I can email out it to Julie to send out is the PDF of it. One thing I will say is based off of it, I don't have anybody at limited and I also don't have anybody at mastering. I have everybody between beginning and advancing for writing because everybody is engaged in it.
So it's 5 o'clock. I'm still going to stay on. If you have any more questions, you're more than welcome to stay. I'm going to stop the recording right now.